Hi there, and welcome to the Data Talks podcast. I'm Mara, part of the curatorial team at the Architectuurmuseum of the Technical University of Munich, and the team behind this series. At Data Talks, we explore the often hidden architectures of data infrastructures and ask why they matter to us as professionals, educators, and citizens. In our first 4 episodes, we look at how the digital shapes our spaces, from energy-hungry server halls to classrooms, and from busy streets to the networks of our minds. These episodes were recorded in winter 2023 during a seminar at TU Munich. If this sparks your interest, come see us in person in Munich too. Starting October 15th, this research and much more will be on display at the exhibition City in the Cloud, Data on the Ground at the Pinakothek der Moderne. And Data Talks will be subsequently updated with new episodes from the upcoming public program. So, keep in touch and have fun listening.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, or evening to you, wherever you are. My name is Geraldus, and I will lead our discussion in today's episode of our series on a very crucial topic regarding the infrastructure of our digital activities. Well, think of yourself now. How could you listen to me now via Spotify? I didn't give you the recording file. So where is this recording stored? In a Spotify cloud. But is the cloud really a cloud? Or it is a huge machinery with many running computer servers draining gigawatts hours energy in data centers across the globe that are connected to you. And now you're listening to my voice. Well, I will ask this question and discuss it with Uli, Mara, Ekaterina, Annika, and our beloved Damian in the studio. So, what do you think?
Okay, so we're streaming it via our operating system on the phone, and I mean the hardware is just there to as an input for this streaming service, which is actually a software which is installed on our phone, I would say, and the streaming.
But for example, if you have a flash disk and you want to get a film, like let's say 10 years ago, if you want to watch a movie, then you would have a CD.
Yeah.
Or if you had a flash disk, you have to ask for your friend for the movie. Your friend has the movie inside the memory card of the laptop.
Yeah.
And you've got it transmitted through your flash disk, and you chop into your laptop the flash and you get it. But
Here it's Wi-Fi, internet, first of all, via
exactly
the sensors that are connecting another device on another distance or in another operating system.
You get it through Wi-Fi. So the flash disk is kind of now substituted by the Wi-Fi signals, let's say. But then in the case of flash disk, you need other laptop which has this file stored. But in the case of Wi-Fi, where would you then get the file?
The Wi-Fi is connecting to the data center where it's stored, and then you extract the data from the storage via Wi-Fi to your device.
Exactly. But your Wi-Fi router is in your room, right?
That's the hardware where I connect the other router, which is connected to the data center. Then I get.
And that's connected by cable, right? Yeah. So we have this one connection via cable, and then there is another connection via waves.
Yeah, erect relays first.
So there are 2 types, I think. Like if you get so basically that's correct. So you have to have an access to a data center somewhere with which Spotify's work for. So where Spotify stores all their music. It could be in USA, it could be in Europe. We don't know. We have to locate them. And our Wi-Fi router, if we use Wi-Fi, then would kind of get our request and then would transmit or would turn that request into light pulses, which would be then circulating in the optic fiber. So there is optic fiber there, and optic fiber consists of a lot of metals, right? So this whole things of getting something digitally or wireless connection, it's marketing thing because everything is connected through this really high costs, or let's say sophisticated produce cables, optic cables.
So in the end, it's cables. Like it's infrastructure is always cables. If it's wireless, it's just like a cable as a hardware that's creating it.
I think there's those maps where you can see how the world is connected via cables.
Exactly.
And they're always saying how you have this deep sea cables through.
And even if you actually also download it via your phone, so which means that you have like 4G or 3G signal, then you would actually transmit your thing. So what we record would be rework in your phone into like this, how do you say, this electromagnetic signals, which would be then sent to those cellular cell towers. And actually, from one cell towers to other cell towers, they will connect in via optic fiber to it. So they will rework the electromagnetic signals that we send to the cellular into light pulses again, until finally it reaches the data center, which contains our podcast now. And this whole infrastructure, I think we need to kind of also take into consideration, because it's a lot of material things behind. It's a lot of resources used behind. It's not just, nothing is in the cloud, Now, the same way works for the cloud too. I mean, if you have 50 gigabytes of Google Cloud, then it is not actually that it is in the cloud, that you extract the data from the brain, but you get it actually in a huge ugly box where all the servers are.
So the only thing that is disconnected from, let's say, from a cable is like this device to the router, or to another device. Product. Yeah. So the other things are all like smart connected by cables or by infrastructure.
I mean, there was also like till 10 years ago when you had the LAN cables.
We just still have coastal like PCs, especially in workstations, because it's still more stable connection than Wi-Fi.
And I think this like physical infrastructure is also often forgotten when talking about places where you can't get easy access to Wi-Fi or something, and you're always wondering why not? It's so easy, it's just Wi-Fi, but you're forgetting the whole field's infrastructure behind it, that of course you need to like put kilometers of cables, you need to build cell towers, you need to...
It also resembles like the whole infrastructure around electricity, right? It's very similar, think about it. Like from the production place to the consumption place and cables in between, you often don't think about electricity in physical terms, but there's some like coal plants or oil plants or like nuclear power plant and wind turbine rotating somewhere or whatever that creates this kind of thing and energy. And so I think it's very comparable to data centers.
Yeah, in a way, of course.
It's just, or to the way data is transmitted, let's say.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked also in Annika's episode on this metaverse thing, and this whole metaverse, it will need a huge storage capacity, and behind its virtual operation. And we have I just got like an article. It will, for example, for the operation of metaverse in Europe, they will have to make a data centers in Amsterdam covering 160 hectares of land. And they will need, I don't believe in the article, but in the article it's written, they will need 1,300 gigawatt hour per year, which it doesn't make sense, which will equal to 1 billion households, and I don't think so. I think they mean like 1,300 megabytes, which will be able actually also to power 1 million households for the use of metaphors in Europe. But I mean, it's insane, like this energy production in the data centers. It's actually we call it like we don't know its existence, but actually behind our digital operations there is another city running, right, in terms of energy usage, right?
And I mean, it's also growing kind of exponentially now because, like, we're always using more and more energy, so we always need to produce more and more energy or data storage because also we're storing everything and having backups and archives, so there's always going to be more. And of course the devices are getting smaller, but they still need the same amount of energy, I figure. So it's just a growing invisible kind of infrastructure behind it.
Obviously, like, to add to that is that the capacity and efficiency of these systems, it's also improving and probably doubling every few years, as we have seen in the Leibniz High Computing Center, which we visited, that every 3 to 6 years they double the computing power, and they also kind of more or less use the same energy for double computing power, right?
But if I heard it correctly, they need to double also power electricity. It was before 10 megawatts hour, and then now it's 20. So they have to double it because the new supercomputer that they just purchased from, what's the name of the company? Yeah,
Intel, I think. Right now, no?
Right now it's Lenovo, actually.
Novo, yeah.
Yeah, it will require like a higher capacity of cooling or better functioning cooling machines, which will then cost them this a lot of energy. So they have to expand, or they have to consume more.
Yeah, and I also, regarding the safety issues, I think if like there's a fire or something, those generators and those argon gases, and I think it was the generators, they need to, if I remember right, be constantly on a like 90% capacity or something. Like they need to be running all the time in order to be quick enough in the case like emergency. Seconds after the fire starts, and then put off, and then in some cases put on. They're constantly running for that one like emergency case. So that's also like another thing running all the time.
Yeah.
Well, now you know that you get to listen to our voices just now by having access in miraculous ways on a certain data center out there which stores our today's podcast episode. Yet, have you seen any data center? I mean, I'm sure you have seen one. They look like storage buildings from the outside without any window. You have seen them probably in your way in a highway into a city. But do you know who owns them? Do you know how do they run economically? Or who runs those data centers aside of those social media companies that we know? And what does it have to do with our city? In order to get clearer on this, Damien and I have with us here Professor Alain Thierstein, an economist and economic geographer who holds the chair of spatial development in our faculty in TUM. So, Professor Thierstein, we have said hello before our recording, and now I want to let our listeners know about your preoccupation. So how long have you actually been professor here?
I started my office here in 2005.
2005, so it's been almost 20 years?
Yeah, good arithmetics.
And then you were born in Germany?
I was born in Switzerland, in St. Gallen, close to the Lake of Constance.
Okay, and what brought you then to Germany?
Well, my first day was during my doctoral thesis, where I worked in Karlsruhe for a Fraunhofer Institute for Systems and Innovation.
Okay.
2 years, and well, then afterwards I was working as a researcher, associate researcher and teacher at the University of St. Gallen, my alma mater, where I did my doctoral graduation, and then I was for 5 years a professor at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, and then in the Department of Architecture.
And you've got
Architectural career started in the year 2000.
okay. But your concern has always been the kind of broader scale of architecture, no? I mean the urban.
But let's say our preoccupation is multiscalarity and interscalarity.
All right.
Important things happen on different spatial scales, and these different spatial scales are interconnected, but not in a linear way, but in a non-linear way. And that's what I'd like to convey to the architectural and urbanist students. Of course, we do research and teaching, and we do studios with that kind of approach.
Yeah, amazing. And it's actually very, therefore, suitable to talk actually about data centers from this point of view, because have you actually ever been in data center?
Absolutely, yes. Well, we checked the world's largest privately run data provider. It's called Interaction, but I think it's a Dutch company originally. It sits in Frankfurt, Hanauer Landstraße, south of Hanauer Landstraße, between the River Main and the Hanauer Landstraße. It's absolutely fascinating. They're growing by, well, you can look how they're fast they're growing. And there, for the first time, we have been to the Rhine-Main region, because we do for 15 years, we do a seminar in the summer term for incoming students that is called the European megacity regions, where we look at emerging polycentric structures.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
And of course, I was there too last year.
you have been there, so
Yes, but
data centers is an important, interesting infrastructure, and I thought, let's check it out. Yeah, we visited the site, and of course, we got the tour by some of the managers of Interaction. Well, it's highly protected. Security is high. Energy consumption is high.
Is it
And from the outside, it's just a box,
all right.
It's just a box. You don't assume that this is a data center. If you would know, they don't care. I mean, they had established already data centers because they took over existing buildings, and they put into the buildings their racks, their servers, and their energy supply systems, and so on. And then they bought also the old headquarter of Neckermann.
Okay.
Neckermann is one of the largest wholesale catalog companies in Germany, like Quelle. It's the Amazon of the past. They're using just the facade and of course the floor space, and then they cram in everything that is possible. So they don't care how it looks from the outside. It's very unspecific in a certain sense. It's industrial space. Of course, you would not assume that this is housing area or recreational area, but it's just industrial space. But it could be anything. The only thing that is absolutely crucial for the activity that Interaction is doing is, of course, the term latency. Latency. That's why physical proximity is the gold standard in comparison to the other kind of data centers where storage capacity is the most important term. Storage capacity. And that can be someplace way out remote in the landscape. And of course, there they look alien, even more alien, because they usually standalone situations. But the latency is very important. That's something that is very important in our research. That is the role of, I would say, the relationship between proximity, physical proximity, and
But Professor Thierstein, concretely speaking, the data center that you're talking about from Interaction, it's like how do you call it? Like a data center which then hosts many companies inside, so many companies' data centers, or it's a cloud-based data centers which is then owned by, I don't know, like Google or Amazon, who have.
They also offer capacity to Google, but mostly to other let's say to Netflix, for example.
All right.
And of course, to the entire banking and financial center. That's why the proximity to the banking and financial center downtown is most crucial, because latency means the more distance you have between your server and the server of your host, the more time it takes for doing operations. And in times where, let's say, hypertrade is important at the stock exchange or any exchange, then of course it's important to be close. So that's really the big difference to having big storage capacity, where the response rate is not important in a certain sense. It's more the reliability and the storage capacity.
Okay, so it's not so far away from the center of the city, you were saying.
Yeah, it's the closest they can get in order to even receive enough electrical power. A few kilometers to downtown, to the financial center.
I was wondering, Professor Thierstein, who are actually investing in these data centers? Are they actually specific companies literally only working on data centers? Or, I mean, we know that, for example, Google or Facebook, those big tech companies, they have their own data centers. But, for example, interactions and stuff, how would you actually explain to us about the economic activity behind?
Yeah, well, usually it's an evolutionary story. These companies who use data for to drive their business model, of course, first they host the storage capacity in-house. They host also the technical capabilities to run this system as a backbone for their own economic activity. And the more sophisticated and the larger the company gets, the more interesting it becomes for this, let's say, data center or / informatics unit to also serve third parties. So they professionalize and they move from only serving in-house purposes to serving third-party purposes.
Okay.
And from there, it's only a minor step then to establish an entire own company with an own purpose, or to establish a subsidiary, like of course Google did, and Amazon with AWS, or Microsoft does with Azure. So they have their own cloud services companies, because they had to master the technology for their own internal purposes first. But then you accrue so much economies of scale and economies of scope over time for your own purposes that it becomes interesting to serve third parties. And then you grow and grow, and then you become an entirely own company that is part of the Alphabet holding structure.
Is it a long-term investment, or it's actually short-term, in the sense that do they rely kind of when they start to serve third party? Is it their only income to actually get the rent money from those companies who then rent space inside the data centers they have?
I would assume the large companies, of course, they are all listed on the stock exchange. You can invest in their shares, and of course you can do that on a short-term basis or on a long-term basis. And up to the Corona pandemic, of course, data centers and cloud services have been one of the most profitable activities for the moment being. And then, of course, the pandemic slowed down turnover activities of consumer goods.
The context of the question was that someone in the podium discussion in Deutsches Architekturmuseum in Darmstadt, I guess, kind of made the analogy between data centers and hotels, because they're kind of similar, because data centers kind of rent rooms to companies, and then as well as hotels who are renting rooms to the people who wants to sleep there. But I mean, in the sense of hotel, then the business would run through, of course, the rent, and then maybe they get also increase of the property. And for sure, if they have become great companies, then they got financialized. And
Well, I mean, if you look at the analogy to hotel industry, I'm not sure whether this holds well. If you look at a large Starwood International conglomerate hotels or Marriott, of course they have a certain the French conglomerate Accor, but Ibis and other hotel styles. So they have a kind of certain levels where you exactly know what you get, to which price, what is the service level. But these companies, the moment they become very successful, they don't only sell hotel rooms. They sell, of course, atmospheres. They sell lifestyles. They sell also consulting to third-party activities. They sell their gastronomy, and depending on the style of the hotel and the level of the differentiation of such companies. So just offering a room is not enough today as a hotel. So you're going bankrupt sooner or later.
all right,
It's in business terms, it means that you, of course, always tend to enlarge and to enhance your value chain. And that is exactly what firms like Interaction also do. So of course they don't only host their racks for companies like Netflix or also a bit of Facebook and Google, but these large conglomerates, they don't have, he said, this guy, at least not in the Frankfurt area, they don't have this huge demand for or necessity for latency in data centers, but much more for storage. And so that's not their business model. But of course, they're interested because of the image factor to also offer services to Google and to Facebook, for example, and others. But basically, they have these large data-driven business models, streaming companies, the entire financial sector, where you have a turnover of billions and billions and billions of data points per day. And what you also, of course, do is, of course, you sell security and safety. That means they have triple or quadruple systems to secure this latency. And that means that there's, of course, a huge amount of idle sitting space that is needed for these backup systems, and the huge amount of fossil fuel energy that is needed for these backup cooling systems. When the primary cooling system fails, this is basically argon. Then, of course, you have a second and a third replacement system, and that is run by heavy fossil fuel.
Just usually diesel generators also they have as a backup facilities. I mean, this is very interesting that all this that you mentioned correlates to this LRZ supercomputer we visited a few weeks ago in Garching. And we usually do there the tours because it's quite fascinating to see the other side, the material side of the cloud and the material side of, bits and bytes and so on. And this brings me, if I just may add one question, is, you could say that the data centers are highly specialized buildings for highly specialized kind of output as well. And do you think in that sense, as a typology, like can we talk about the data center as a new kind of infrastructure, a new typology itself? Or is it kind of comparable, let's say, to the factories and warehouses of the previous century? Like, is there a correlation? And why I'm asking that is because maybe it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on the role of these data centers might potentially take in the future in our city infrastructure. Like, can they make it better? Can they make it more civic? Can they enhance the urban experience for the everyday citizen? So do you kind of see any, maybe optimism there or any kind of potential in this incredible accumulation and spending in this infrastructure, digital infrastructure? And so So yeah, maybe just a few.
I mean, to be precise, I don't mean that the buildings are highly specific in their appearance, but they're highly specific in their use.
Yeah.
So they seem to be very flexible in what the original structure of the building, the construction characters are all about.
Yeah.
So from the outside, you don't see them. It's not even indicated that this is a data center. For the most people, they would say, well, it's a boring situation because you walk for hundreds and hundreds of meters along the street. But again, it's kind of a box. It's only a box, so you cannot tell. Even if it's nicely painted in different shades of green, you don't see what it is. You don't recognize. The guys, of course, our students were very attentive. Of course, they were asking, what about the climate crisis, energy waste, CO2 emissions, and so on and so forth. And they said, yes, they are also very much aware of it, in particular because the stock exchange listed companies, they also have to follow the ESG requirements. So that means you have to do something about your specific energy consumption ratio. But so far he admitted they didn't invest on that, but that's big on their agenda because they cannot get away with it. So that's something, energy recuperation, maybe producing PV or putting PV elements and producing their own electricity and stuff. So that's definitely something that is coming. From the outside experience, I definitely would say there is room to improve because these spaces, of course, classical office park situations, very monofunctional. So they just switch from an old monofunctional use into a new monofunctional use. And of course, that's something where usually knowledge-intensive workers don't want to work today. They want to work in mixed surroundings, mixed-use surroundings. So it's going to be a very much challenge, a part of the safety and the security issue, to somehow open up these areas and let in different other uses, gastronomy, maybe a daycare center, some medical facilities, sports activities, and so on and so forth.
If I may say something, I think Prof. Just kind of highlight the infrastructureness or the nature of infrastructure to be found as the main trait of data center, right? So if we are talking about data centers as city infrastructures, it actually kind of until now kind of has a minimum effect on the city. You know, I mean, it's kind of a, how do you say, like very neutral towards the city. And then Professor Thierstein just kind of explained that it could actually be redesigned. I mean, but the following question to that is like, when you said before, at the one hand, they have to kind of maintain the security. So the kind of closeness of the mass of the building is needed actually to secure the data inside. And I mean, if they are burned, then it's finished, no? What is it the way to make actually this openness or to make this opening in the data centers, but at the same time also maintaining the security for, I mean, spatially speaking now?
That's I believe that's a standard task which has different replies. For example, I tell you two examples which for industries where this issue has been solved very differently. If you look at the pharmaceutical company Novartis in Basel, so they have the Novartis campus in the center of the city of Basel. City in the city. This has been designed in a master plan by Vittorio Lampugnani, because he, as a Renaissance man, believes in cities in city, which was wrong at the time already. But of course, he got into the head of the CEO, Daniel Vasella, and he believed him. And so they established a hidden city in the city of Basel, with all walled off. It's nobody that is not entitled could ever enter the buildings. I have been there quite sometimes, and so they have this assemblage of all these star architectural buildings, and the safety issue, the security issue is of course solved in the sense that there is a fence and an electronic control system around the campus. That's the argument. Once you're in, you can more or less move freely, and there's lots of different shops and restaurants and Thai and Vietnamese and so cuisines. So that's all for their people that stay there for 24 hours and so on and so forth. But once you're in, you can move about freely. Opposite solution is in Essen in Germany.
Okay.
ThyssenKrupp, the headquarter of ThyssenKrupp, which also has been redone. And if you walk around, you can walk around freely, an open landscape. We don't discuss the qualities of that landscape architecture, but only if you want to enter the specific buildings, then you have, of course, an entry control where only somebody with a badge can enter. So there they say the entire premises is open and can be experienced by all kinds of people. But when you want to enter an individual building, then you have to prove your identity and your purpose. And of course, in Basel, they do it the other way around. It's all sealed off, and within you can walk around almost freely. So the argument is always the same. I asked both head architects of the premises, why do you do that? And in Basel, they say, well, it's the safety issue, security. And in Essen, they say it's the safety issue, security.
Yeah. So there is actually like operational solutions to.
There is absolutely operational solutions. It is more a game of mind, how we organize that.
And creativity, I guess. Yeah, but I have actually a second point to that, because talking again about the infrastructure, like on the one hand, it could be kind of open to public, so it could be like public space where actually other activities than the activities of data centers take place. But on the other hand, you have mentioned before the energy consumption, no? And I have got the info that actually Interaction did kind of experiment in Frankfurt to actually try to power, or not power, sorry, but to heat 3,000 households actually nearby there. In the podium discussion of the owners of, not the owners, but the manager of data centers in Darmstadt, they also actually colossally say that actually the energy waste, no, sorry, the heat waste of data centers could be reused for actually heating the houses nearby. But it's just like there's a lack of political will, they say. But now that you have visited Interaction, have you heard about that before?
Yeah, it's not also that they are late in engaging in these energy efficiency issues, but they run also in these very strange institutional problems that they cannot supply energy runoff energy, heat, into the public heating system because the regulations doesn't allow that. So obviously it also needs, as always, by the way, as always, you have technological innovation, and to make it more sociable, viable, you need also institutional innovation. So you need to change the contextual variables in order to better encompass and better contextualize what they are doing and what they can offer in the sense of industrial ecology activities, giving and taking.
So it's basically then the same problem that also Leibniz Rechenzentrum in Garching also faced, yeah?
It's a legislative problem, basically.
I think 2 weeks ago, the digital ministry of Hessen, where Frankfurt is, said and promoted her vision that Hessen should be the new Silicon Valley of, in Germany. because they have currently, I think, 60 data centers, and many of them are hyperscaler. Many of them are kind of this heavy data centers. What would it change then for the city? I mean, if there are such a concentrations of data centers, they say it will look like Silicon Valley.
Well, the physical structure doesn't change at all because they don't want to build a new. They love to use derelict buildings and go into there because that's the ones that are close to the city center. Well, Silicon Valley is something totally different. I mean, one of the most important features of Silicon Valley is, of course, there's a entrepreneurial culture which is not in existence in the entire of Germany. So you can call yourself Silicon Valley, but of course you won't work like Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Of course, let's say, but the real thing is, of course, the core competence in the Rhine-Main region is really their concentration in logistics infrastructure, the airport, air cargo, roads and streets and rail, and of course this kind of data logistics. So that's what they really do. That's the most important value added element in the entire value chain is logistics in a wider sense, including data center infrastructure, financial centers.
I would like to kind of hear your opinion and your insight into this idea of whether we can treat this digital infrastructure as something that is not only to the benefit of private corporations and to the services of these corporations, but whether we can rethink the way that this infrastructure becomes more civic and more city infrastructure in some way, like from the way it's being used to the way it's being visible or invisible. Because I think that this kind of proximity that you're talking about to the city is visible once you really look for it. But other than that, these data centers are highly invisible just because they're very generic in their nature. So I wonder, do you think we need to make this infrastructure more civic, more visible, and more somehow, in a didactic way, introduce it to the citizen in a different way? Like, should this become more a topic of everyday debate and discussions? I mean, that's something that I'm thinking about often as a way to kind of, if you think about the railway, right, the building of the railway in the 19th, 20th century, if you think about the factories, again, at the beginning of the 20th century, and what it did to labor. I mean, they were also very specialized buildings, but they were full with people, right? The factory, it was a place where, it was a place of contestation and of philosophical thought as well, right? But somehow the data centers are not at the center of this debate. And I just wonder whether this invisibility is intentional and whether we as architects can kind of intervene there somehow.
Yeah, but I mean, there's big differences, of course. The entire society and the way we organize ourselves is, of course, moving away on a secular basis from very heavy, strong materials into dematerializing everything. And that is, of course, the epitome is, of course, the data center or the cloud. But the cloud is only a metaphor because there's always a physical thing behind. And the labor, you do that, there's no manual hard labor anymore. The racks and the bits and bytes are doing the job alone. So it's powered by electricity and it's secured by fossil fuel, batteries and stuff. I actually would say the change is predominantly coming, of course, from the one hand side from people that are employed themselves there, these knowledge-intensive workers that are not interested in working someplace where it's not highly accessible by bike, by walking, by public transport, where you don't have a mixed use in the premises, sports facilities, interesting activities for the breaks, medical facility, childcare, cultural activities. So this kind of adding other urban functions at this highly centralized urban infrastructure is definitely one activity that is coming along and has to come along, because then, if not, they're losing their most important factor, and that is, of course, highly qualified and skilled and motivated people. So they don't go there, they go elsewhere. The other thing is, of course, can you kind of develop a scenography for a scenography for visiting, let's say, at least the outside of these premises, and make more transparent what these data centers actually do for our daily life. Because if I'm sitting at my screen like with you now, but afterwards I'm gonna order something in Zalando or in Amazon, of course, then probably one of the data centers is activated, and the order is processed, and so on and so forth. So physically, of course, something is happening because I'm using this. And of course, this is something we now rely heavily on our daily basis. So I think that could be kind of promotional, touristic, educational, leisure time scenography that helps to understand that the outside is a very still up to now a very generic building type, but in the inside there is something very different that has to do with us. And we are generating these buildings, or the uses at least. We are generating them.
Probably I'm wrong on this, but every time I think about a data center, I'm always thinking it would be very interesting to think about this in terms of public library, like, and compare them somehow to this wonderful infrastructure that contains a lot of knowledge, a lot of information that is highly visible in a city, that serves different kind of constituencies and different types of citizens. And it's a building that kind of opens up to the public. And somehow, if I'm always comparing the data centers to a public library where there is all of this knowledge and all this data being contained, but what does this mean for this type of buildings if it becomes way more accessible? It's a very new, interesting problem that I think that architects should and have to contribute to, because they would have a lot of kind of architectural expertise and knowledge to solve a lot of these issues and to really rethink data through a public domains. So for me, this is crucial, and I really am optimistic that perhaps, as now there are book clubs that discuss different book every month in a library, there will be an evening where we can discuss a certain data set, whether it's about climate record, whether it's about a certain element that we can all gather and really talk about different data sets and what it contains, what kind of information it contains, what it can do with it. So I think that this kind of, it's the beginning of a long kind of reinterpretation of this whole idea of how we introduce this data into the city space and into the civic life. And I think this has to be, for me, the future.
Well, I have maybe two ideas that come to the fore. The first is, of course, a very pragmatic one. That is, I'd like to see the big data centers join the drive for more energy efficiency, so that they're also part of the coalition that tries to be more efficient and not more exhaustive or consumptive. And the other one is maybe more on an epistemological level, because I think it's very helpful to distinguish these three dimensions. Data is first. Data is transformed into information, and information through only personal interaction of human beings is finally getting into knowledge. Of course, the data centers, they don't contain any single piece of knowledge. So, of course, the knowledge is only something, as always and forever and ever, that human beings are able to create out of information. Of course, they have very different tools, very more efficient, faster tools, but it's the personal interaction. And I think that's something that should be like made possible, made visible, more to use them as kind of a basic infrastructure in a co-creation process, to then use information and to create something for the betterment of the city. But this is something people have to do, and it's not the centers, and there is nothing for us usable in there. It's an intermediate storage.
Professor Thierstein, thank you so much for giving us this really great insight.
Okay, thanks a lot. It was big fun.
Thank you.
See you again. Bye-bye.
So now I hope that we understand more about data center. With Professor Thierstein, we have learned about the types of data centers, how it runs economically, and we also touch upon the heat waste topic, its regional influence, and last but not least, we had also architectural discussions on how we would design a data center as a more civic and social infrastructure. And coming back to the studio with my architect colleague, we will discuss in the last part of this episode the importance of making data centers visible and how would they design data centers so that it fulfills, so that it becomes more civic and more social. So stay tuned, check it out. So how would you then actually design, now coming back to data centers, how would you then design data centers? And if you would place it in this, I mean, I think we agree that we would maybe place it in the city. Now we have to forget, of course, the economic burden for data centers if they are built in the cities. But let's say if you would have if you would have task to design data centers in the city.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's also something that needs to follow very closely with the development in technology, right? For example, there are recently developments into decentralization of data storage. So you have experiments like Grow Your Cloud, which is this practice that tries to store data into plants, going back to the plants thing. But because plants are basically carbon, right? So you can store data into plants actually.
Okay.
Or like the idea that you can store data in various much smaller facilities and then connect them in a different way that they work as one. So like decentralization is something that probably, we don't know. At the moment, it doesn't work in that way because you have few companies who own data centers, right? And so this would be an interesting point. Like if you think about breaking this thing down, so maybe change the ownership structure of data, and then you can say some of this have place in the city, others can place outside of the city. Then you can design them differently, right? Yeah. You can have a house which is at the same time a data center and community meeting space and discussion space and a library and whatnot. And you can have a factory outside of the city, which is just storing data. So you can have different types, I think, of infrastructure.
And there's also the thing about how our inner cities, for example, are slowly abandoned, or there's so many office spaces which are not used, so maybe you don't really have to redesign or build a new, especially when you're doing like this decentralized smaller versions of it. So maybe you can also just place them in already existing structures somehow. There's lots of mall kind of things, or like Kaufhäuser, I don't know, which don't have as many windows. I don't know, maybe you can secure them in a easy way, I don't know, but there's also this possibility of reusing.
Yeah, I think this is also pretty interesting with this decentralizing in combination with the use of the resource of the waste of this data centers are pretty interesting also in terms of, say, energetic transformations of buildings. Because if you have, for example, in an utopian version, a data center in every cellar and in every house or in every attic, probably you don't need, in the winter you don't need a heating system, for example, if it works how. Yeah. So this thing would be interesting, and I don't know if you need these big facilities in a way still in one kind of box which is outside the city, let's say the urban data civic center could still be a symbolic
things is similar to maybe I don't know what Thierstein meant with this like this more scenographic way of dealing with it, but it's like kind of this also like the Parc de la Villette from Chumi, that you have like maybe these different follies, yeah. The follies who are like somehow representing it in a way and like remind you. I mean, it can be symbolic, but it can be also very functional. I just don't know if for example, you have like, for example, in Romania or also in different other countries, there was also the Biennale, I think, this example of these gas lines were like shaping the cities and going around everywhere. So you see these gas not stations, so this infrastructures or these boxes where you can read how much gas you used the last time, and then you have this infrastructure going around and it's everywhere. It's visible in the city. You already know it's coming from there and it's going to there. And if for example, the infrastructure of the data is already existing like under the ground, probably you have to somehow figure out a different way, probably a symbolic way to make it visible to people.
And I think technically speaking, their smart city would play big role because it needs to be integrated. It needs to be, operated in a, holistic way. I mean, there should be a common platform for this informations. So for example, if your cellar would produce more heat than the other and the other has less, then the smart city application, whatever it is, should then distribute your your heat waste to others.
Yeah, there's also with solar panels and stuff. It's like casual. It's a way more it's a way less egoistic thinking or less egoistic way of thinking, and more like about the neighborhood, and like everybody can like somehow controlled and distribute equal between everyone in a way. But it has also to be somehow designed, and I mean, if it's a holistic thing and it should appear, it's also kind of designed. It's also a big topic. So it's also a topic to design like data centers, but also let's say the infrastructure itself, and maybe also the appearance of infrastructures, if those are follies or other parasites who are around the city.
Yeah, I think also architects like to think through topologies. It's a bit old-fashioned on this, but it would be interesting to think this through in various topologies of data center, data park, data house, data playground, data XYZ. Yeah, like I think then we start to open this to a bit more spatial way, maybe in more like graspable
for designers, right? So we're at the end of our episode. We learned today a lot about data center. I hope we now comprehend the material side behind our digital activities, and that we understand that the cloud is just a marketing term. And I wish that more architects will discuss about this matter, and we will make data infrastructure and especially data center more civic, more social, and more integrated into the city.